Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Taanis Daf Chavav begins the fourth and final parak of the Masechta. Like the preceding two, this Masechta begins with all the Mishnayos of the entire parak all presented up front. So it's a lengthy Mishnah on the Daf that covers 3/4 of the Daf. It will discuss the halachos of fast days, ta'anesim, other than rain-related fast days. We're moving away from the topic of rain. We'll discuss the ma'amados fast days, which the Mishnah will explain. We'll discuss the halachos of other fast days. Specifically, we'll talk about when berachos kohanim apply to these fast days and why. Along the way, the Mishnah will mention the 9 families that had rights to bring wood to the Beis HaMikdash on 9 specific days of the year and what those days were. Then we'll talk about the fast days of Shivas or B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, what they commemorate, and some of the restrictions leading up to Tisha B'Av. So the Mishnah begins, and it says that there are 3 times during the year when there is Berachos Kahanim, 4 times on each of the days. What are those 3 times? So it's fast days, it's Ma'amados, and Yom Kippur. Fast days being the other fast days besides for Yom Kippur. So on all fast days you have 4 tefillos, Shachris, Mincha, Musaf, Ni'ila. In the days of the Mishnayos, they said Ni'ila on every fast day. Also you have Ma'amados, and also you have Yom Kippur. Now the Gemara will ask the obvious kasha, there's no Musaf on a fast day, and there's no Musaf on Ma'amados. The Gemara will address that. Now, what are Ma'amados? So the Gemara says Ma'amados are the groups of people who are appointed as shifts of Yisraelim. Thus we have shifts of Kahanim and shifts of Levim to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, or also shifts of Yisraelim. Their job was to take responsibility for the karbanos. They represent the rest of the congregation for the karbanos that are being brought. And the Mishnah describes how we arrive at the sleep. The Mishnah says that the pasuk describing the karban and Talmud says, Tzavas b'nei Yisrael, command the Jewish people. And then it says, Karbani lachmi, you should bring my carbon, my bread. So you see that the command is given to all of Yisrael to bring the carbon and Talmud. That means that the carbon Talmud is brought for all of Yisrael. So the question is, if it's brought for you, how can you not be there? How can you not be involved, watching over, and taking responsibility for your karbanos? You have to. So there has to be somebody representing the klal. So there were 24 shifts of Yisraelim whose job was to represent the klal. Just like there was 24 shifts of Kohanim, which each took a week, rotating to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And there were 24 shifts of Levim. There were also 24 shifts of Yisraelim. Now these shifts were 2 jobs particular. There was one that lived in Yerushalayim. Their job was to go to the Beis HaMikdash and actually stand there and observe and say tefillos and be mispal while the Kohanim were bringing those karbanos. Then there were another shift in the rest of the cities of Eretz Yisrael. Their job was to do a specific series of laning from the Torah and tefillos and fasting as part of their karbanos. So the Gemara describes how their laning went. The Gemara says that the laning went as follows. They read from Sefer Bereshis, from Brias Olam, from the beginning of Sefer Bereshis. Now they had to read 3 aliyos. This is for Shachris, that is. They had to read 3 aliyos of 3 psukim each. So you needed at least 9 psukim. The problem is each of the days of Brias Olam is not 9 psukim long. So each Mama, they read 2 days of Brias Olam so that they got to 9 psukim. So the Mishnah describes it as follows. On the first day, they read Bereshis and Yehirakia. That's the first 2 days. On the second day, they read day 2 and 3, Yehirakia and Yikav Mayim. On the third day of Ma'amados, that's the third day of the week, for this Maimid, they read day 3 and 4. So they read Yikav Mayim and Yehima Oros. On the fourth day, they read Yehima Oros and Yishurtzu Amayim. On the fifth day, they read Yishurtzu Amayim and Totzi Ha'aretz. On the 6th day, they read Totzi Ha'aretz and Reichul HaShamayim. And those were the 6 days of the week. Now, how did they divide it up into 3 aliyos? So whichever was the larger of the 2 days they were reading, the 2 days of Brias Olam that were being read, they split up into 2 aliyos. Gemara will explain how they split it if they didn't have 6 psukim. And then the other day was read as 1. Now, there is a comment here in parentheses which does not appear in the Mishnayos that we have, but it does appear in the Vilna Shas in parentheses. It says that the people of the Maimid would fast 4 days of the week. They didn't fast on Sunday because it would be too much to go from a full day of Shabbos to a day of fasting. It would be damaging to their health. They didn't fast on Friday because of Kavod Shabbos, but they fasted Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, the Mishnah goes further and it continues describing how they read it. So the laning, as we described, was at Mincha. By Musaf, that was included in the Mincha service. By Mincha, they each came in and read on their own, just like you say Shema, they read it by heart. They didn't have laning from the actual Torah itself. Erev Shabbos, Mincha, they did not do any special Maimed Tfilos because it was Kavod Shabbos was required. They didn't have time to do special Tfilos at that time. The Mishnah now describes several days in which there was no time for the Maimed Tfilos because there were other Tfilos going on and therefore there was no time for it. So the first is that any day that had Halal, there was no Maimed by Shachos, there was no time for it. Now, on a day where there was Musaf, or a day where there was something called Karban Eitzim is when certain Karbana is when wood was brought to the Mizbeach. That was only brought by certain families. And this may refer only to those families. So you have Karban Musaf and you have Karban Eitzim. Karban Eitzim happened late in the day. So Karban Musaf and Karban Eitzim mean when either of those happened, there weren't time for other Mamados. So the Gemara the Mishnah has a machlokas, which one was which. According to Rabbi Akiva, when there was Musaf, there was no Ne'ilah Mamados. And when there was Karban Eitzim, there was no Mincha Mamados. Menazeh has it the other way. He quotes Rabbi Yeshua, who says that when there was Musaf, there was no Mincha Mamados, and when there was Karban Eitzim, there was no Ne'ilah Mamados. And Rabbi Akiva himself changed to say like Ben Ezai, he had that version as well. Now, what are the Karban Eitzim? Karban Eitzim is that there were 9 families who had the right to bring wood to the Mizbeach, for the Mizbeach, and they had 9 specific days of the year in which they brought it. The Gemara will describe why they had that privilege. And now the Mishnah lists what those 9 families were and what day they could bring. So the first of Nisan was the day of Orach ben Yehuda. The 20th of Tammuz was the day of the family of David ben Yehuda. And the 5th of Av was the family of Parosh ben Yehuda. And the 7th of Av was the day of Bnei Yonadav ben Rechev. On the 10th of Av was the day of Sana ben Binyamin, which we had quoted earlier in the Masechta. On the 15th of Av was the day of Zusa ben Yehuda, and together with them were Kohanim, Leviim, and anybody who doesn't know their Shevet. Now these families were called Bnei Gunvi, Aili, the people who stole the pestle, and Bnei Kote Ketzios, the people who cut the dates. The figs, that is. The Gemara will describe why they have those names. Now, continuing the list, on the 20th of Av was the family of Pras Moav ben Yehuda. On the 20th of El was the family of Adin ben Yehuda. And the first of Teves was again the family of Parosh. And the second, so that was the second shift of Parosh. And the first of Teves, the Mishnah describes you did not have Maimid or you did not have any Mamodos at all. You didn't have by Shachar because it was Halal because it was Rosh Chodesh. You didn't have by Mincha or by Ne'ilah because it was a Karban Musaf and a Karban Eitzim. Karban Eitzim because it was brought then. That was one of the days on the list. Like we just said, it was the day of Parosh. And you didn't have by Ne'ilah because it was a Karban Musaf. And now the Mishnah goes to list the things that happened on the days of Shavuos B'Tammuz and at Tisha B'Av. So 5 things happened on each of those days. So the Mishnah lists them. On Shavuos B'Tammuz, the luchos were broken. The Karban Tomad stopped being brought because of the Gzeira of the Malchus. The city of Yerushalayim was broken into. Apostomus burned a Sefer Torah that was after the Korban already. A statue, an idol, was placed in the Beis HaMikdash in the Heichal. Now on Tisha B'Av, that was when the decree happened because of the Meraglim that Klal Yisrael would not enter Eretz Yisrael at all. That entire generation was going to die in the Midbar. It was also the day of the destruction of the first and the second Beis HaMikdash. It was the day that the city of Veitar was destroyed by the Romans. It was the day that Yerushalayim was plowed over by the Romans. And those are the 5 things that happened then. Now some halachos for Tisha B'Av and Av. So as we get closer and closer to Tisha B'Av, beginning with Rosh Chodesh Av, we are mimayit and b'simcha. We decrease our joyful activities. The week that Tisha B'Av falls, in that week, it's forbidden to take haircuts and it's forbidden to wash, to do laundry, unless it falls on a Friday, in which case Thursday is permitted. Thursday is Erev Tisha B'Av, then it's permitted because of Kavod Shabbos. You could take a haircut and you could do laundry. Now, on Erev Tisha B'Av itself, whatever the day is, a person should not eat 2 cooked foods, only one in his final meal, should not eat meat, should not drink wine. Now, Rav Shimon Gamliel says he should do something different. The Gemara will describe what different means. Rav Yehuda says he should turn over the bed and sit on the low surface. The Chachamim did not agree with that. Rav Shimon Gamliel now takes us into the description of Chamisha Asar B'Av, 2 B'Av. So Rav Shimon Gamliel says there was no Yom Tov in Klal Yisrael like 2 B'Av and Yom Kippur, that the girls of Yerushalayim would go out wearing borrowed white dresses, borrowed so that nobody would be able to tell who was rich and who was poor, nobody should be embarrassed. Anybody who borrowed a dress, of course, had to do tevilah. They had to put the dress into the mikveh because nobody knew which one was tameh and which one was tahar. So when you got yours back, you had to do tevilah also. They went out and they sang and they danced in the vineyards. And what did they say? What were the phrases that they said? So the Gemara will explain it more at length, but what they said was along the following lines. They said, young man, place your eyes and see what you want to choose. Don't put your eyes on beauty, put your eyes on family, on mishpacha. For sheker achein v'hevel hayofi ishi ras Hashem hi tishalo, beauty and favor are falsehood and vanity. Only the fear of heaven is praiseworthy in a woman. They also said, Tinula mipri yodavi halu b'shara ma'aseh, give her the fruit of her labors and praise her on the gates because of her actions. Also says, Tzanu Rena Benos Tzion B'Melech Shlomo B'Torah She'itol Imu B'Yom Chasanasi B'Yom Simchas Libo. Go out and see daughters of Tzion, King Shlomo, the crown that his mother crowned him with on the day of his wedding, on the day of the joy of his heart. What does that mean? The day of his wedding is the day of Matan Torah, and the day of the joy of his heart is the day of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. This concludes the lengthy Mishnah. The Gemara now begins by analyzing it step by step. So first of all, the Gemara wants to know, how could we say that there were 3 times in the year when there were 4 ma'amados, because there was Musaf, was one of the 4. There is no Musaf on Taanis and on Ma'amados days. How could there be 4 times a year, which we had said, that is, that there's Berachos Kohanim 4 times during the day. That's only if there's Musaf, but there's only Musaf amongst that list on Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says you have to add some words in here and read it as follows. There's 4 times during the year where there's Berachos Kohanim in every tefillah of the day. Those would be Ma'amados, Tanios, and Yom Kippur. Therefore, however many tefillahs there are, every single one has Berachos Kohanim. Among that list of the 3 times during the year, I should say, the 3 times during the year when you had Berachos Kohanim in every tefillah, one of them had 4 tefillos in the day, and that's Yom Kippur, which had Shachris, Mincha, Musaf, and Ne'ilah. Now, says the Gemara, it's actually, this is all one opinion, but it's a 3-way machlokes, which tefillos Berachos Kohanim was actually said when you had 4 things. When you had Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, and Ne'ilah, which ones got Berachos Kohanim, which did not. So the opinion of Rabbi Meir is what we've seen in our Mishnah. He says all 4 had Berachos Kohanim. Now Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says Shachris and Musaf, the first 2 had Berachos Kohanim. Mincha and Ne'ilah, the last 2, did not have Berachos Kohanim. Rabbi Yossi has a different opinion. He says they all had Berachos Kohanim except for Mincha. Now the Gemara explains what these opinions are. So the Gemara says as follows. Generally, the problem with Berachos Kohanim is that you can't do Berachos Kohanim when you have alcohol in the system, and people, whenever they ate a meal, would drink wine. Wine was the only drink that they had, and therefore they would have alcohol. So we couldn't have generally Berachos Kohanim by Mincha or by Ne'ilah. Berachos Kohanim could only be had on a Shachris and a Musaf, because that was generally daven before any meal happened, and therefore you didn't have to worry about the Kohanim having alcohol in the system. Says Rabbi Meir, on a fast day, you don't have to worry about it. Therefore, on a fast day, you could have Berachos Kohanim on all 4 tefillos, or 3 tefillos, however many there are. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we have to make Gzeira. If we allow you to do it on a fast day, then you end up doing it on a weekday. And therefore, Mincha and Ne'ilah, you can't have Berachos Kohanim even on a fast day, even though they couldn't possibly have alcohol in the system, because the rest of the days of the year, they would have alcohol in the system during those tefillos. Now, says Rabbi Yossi, that's true for Mincha, because Mincha you have every day of the year. So therefore, we don't want you to have Mincha, we don't want you to do Berachos Kohanim by Mincha even on a fast day, so you shouldn't end up doing Berachos Kohanim by Mincha on a different day when you may have drunk. However, Ne'ilah is only done once a year. Ne'ilah is only done on a fast day. In their days, they had it on every fast day. Today, we have it only on Yom Kippur. But either way, it's only on the fast day. So you don't have to worry that if you have them do Berachos Kahanim by Ne'ilah on a fast day, they can end up doing Berachos Kahanim by Ne'ilah when they've eaten, because they will never have Ne'ilah when they have eaten. Those are the three opinions. The Gemara now says the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. The Gemara has three ways of saying the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. Three different ways of phrasing it. One is the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. That's how Rav Yehuda Merav expressed it. Rabbi Yochanan said the minig of the people is like Rabbi Meir, and Rava said the minig is like Rabbi Meir. These three expressions mean different things. If you say the halacha is like Rabbi Meir, it means you should say a drasha in the Beis Medrash. You should tell everybody, announce the halacha is like Rabbi Meir, because that's the halacha. If you say the minig of the people is like Rabbi Meir, that just means that this is the custom that's established, but it's not something that's paskin as a halacha. And therefore, you could tell people, if they ask, what am I supposed to do? You tell them this is what you're supposed to do, but you shouldn't give a drasha to that end. Now, the lowest level is if you say the minig is like Rabbi Meir, then all you're saying is that if somebody keeps that minig, you allow it to go. It's established minig and you let it go. But you do not actually paskin for people that that's what they're supposed to do. Okay, now these are three ways of saying that the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. Says the Gemara, not everybody agrees that halacha is like Rabbi Meir. Rav Nachman says actually halacha is like Rabbi Yosi. Now, according to Rabbi Yosi, you can do Berachos Kahanim every tefillah except for mincha. So the Gemara says, so how come in our days we do Berachos Kahanim by mincha on a fast day? So the Gemara answers, it depends when you're saying mincha. If you're doing mincha late, so then it's near the end of the day, then it's like a ne'ilah. Just like an ne'ilah is at the end of the day, and therefore you don't have to worry about drunkenness. It'll be the same, it'll be comparable to ne'ilah, just like ne'ilah you're allowed to say Berachos Kahanim, because ne'ilah only happens on a fast day, so too mincha you're allowed to do Berachos Kahanim, because it only happens on a fast day. However, if you're saying early, doing Berachos Kahanim, if you're doing mincha early, then you cannot do Berachos Kahanim on a fast day. Okay. Now the Gemara says, well, we see from here, though, that everybody does agree that a person who has alcohol in his body is not allowed to do a Berachos Kahanim. A Kohen who drunk cannot do a Berachos Kahanim. The Gemara wants to know what the source for that is. The Gemara gives two sources. The Gemara, first of all, says the Parsha of Berachos Kahanim is listed right next to the Parsha of Nazir, to teach you that just like a Nazir can't drink wine, a Kohen is also not allowed to drink wine when he's doing Berachos Kahanim. So Gemara asks, so if that's true, so then you should learn other halachas from Nazir. Just like a Nazir is not allowed to eat grape seeds, a Kohen should not be able to have eaten grape seeds when he does Berachos Kahanim. So Gemara says, no, for that I have another source. I have the fact that the Torah says, L'shor soy levarach b'shema. We put together avoda and baracha. Avoda and Berachos Kahanim. And the halachos for doing the avoda are just like the halachos for Berachos Kahanim. Just like doing the avoda, you're allowed to do if you have grape seeds in your body, so you're also allowed to say the Berachos Kahanim if you have grape seeds in the body. So Gemara says, but if that's true, you're comparing it to the avoda, so then just like the avoda, you can't do if you have a mum, a Kohen with a mum can't do the avoda, a Kohen with a mum should also not be allowed to do Berachos Kahanim. So Gemara says, no, for that reason, compared to Nazir, there's no problem of mum. So Gemara says, hold on a second, it means you're learning leniently both ways. As far as mum, you're saying I'm going to compare it to a Nazir and therefore he's allowed to have a mum. And as far as grapeseed, you're saying I'm going to compare it to the avod and therefore he could have grapeseed in his body. How do you know to go leniently both ways? Maybe go strictly both ways. Learn from the Nazir that he's not allowed to have grapeseed and learn from the avod that he's not allowed to have a mum. Someone says, no, these halachas are older. Abanon, this is only an asmach, that's only a hint from the psukim, and therefore we go lenient.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethe.daf@gmail.com.